During the last briefing, we told you that on October 11th in Vientiane in Laos, Russian Foreign Minister will participate in the 19th summit, East Asian Summit. This has always been a key element of ASEAN architecture. It has always been key in Asia-Pacific region. Additional materials in this regard will be published in our feed in social media. Moreover, there is a number of bilateral meetings. We will notify you as soon as we can. Let's move to our international agenda. Let's talk about Lebanon in the Middle East, the current situation there. Let me remind you that on October 7th, 2023, there was a bloody terrorist attack on Lebanese citizens, a lot of casualties, and then a chain of bloody events followed in the Middle East in general. Over the past year, dozens of thousands of people died. The majority of those people are people who have become victims from all the parties, being civilians. Among them are children, women, the elderly. This all happened against the against the backdrop of the U.S. fueling the situation and attempts by the West to block all the attempts by our country and by all clear-thinking international community to transfer this conflict to diplomatic realm and political realm. An example of this, this destructive policy of the US, the UK, and their satellites and at the UN Security Council. We have regularly commented on the situation in the region, according in connection with the Russian citizens living there. We have a lot of requests for today's briefing. The Israeli aggression in Lebanon, despite the calls for a ceasefire from the international community, continues to exist. The Israeli air forces on a daily basis strike massive missiles and bomb strikes above southern Lebanon. Day and night there are hundreds of reconnaissance and strikes and UAVs. They hardly strike at Lebanon at random. The targets are weapons depots of Hezbollah, fighters, commanders, military, civilian infrastructure of the Shiite movement, medicinal and media centers. We see that how international humanitarian law is trampled afoot. A part of the attacks is falling on densely populated areas in Lebanon and other cities, but Israeli fighters do not take into account, it's really hard to pronounce this term that came from the West, with collateral damage among the civilians. On September 27th, during the bombing killed the leader of Hezbollah. 6 residential buildings were turned to rubble with everyone who was inside those buildings. Warnings directed at the Lebanese to evacuate from one or other district are not specific and useless, and the number of civilians far exceeds the number of the Shiite movement militants. Over 1 million of residents of the southern part of Lebanon became internally displaced persons. 400,000 people managed to cross the border with Syria, but Israeli Air Force launched a targeted strike destroying the road surface within the Masna border crossing. Israel declared on September 30th a ground invasion in Lebanon. It has stalled now. The raids of Israeli militants end with violent clashes, heavy casualties. We have information that Hezbollah, including its military wing, has obviously retained its manageability. It shows resilience and order. I'd like to emphasize one more time, you have to see how many victims we have witnessed among civilians. Russia was one of the countries that sent to Beirut shipment of humanitarian aid. The return flight of the Ministry of Emergency Situations brought family members of the embassy staff and other Russian missions abroad home. We consider Lebanon to be one of the components of this unprecedented escalation in the Middle East. We strongly condemn any forceful actions to fan region-wide fire. We extend, let me say it one more time, we've said it plenty of times now, our sincere sympathy to those who has suffered. We'd like to say words of condolences to family members of those who have died over the past year. We are in favor of an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. In this, we see the sincere character of our condolences and our sympathies. We see many people shedding tears, but continue to fan the conflict. We are in favor of diplomatic and political resolution, settlement of the conflict. We'd like to see the ceasefire in Lebanon and its neighboring countries. Our priority is diplomatic and political settlement. We need to find a balance of interests and use universal principle of equitable and universal security. We are aiming at coordination of international efforts with international and regional partners. I would also like to comment on a strike at Damascus on October 8th. Israel violated the sovereignty of Syria and struck at one residential building in Damascus. Syrian authorities said that 7 civilians died, including women and children. 11 people were injured. Now they're now reorganizing the rubble to see the victims. The attack was in the third party in the densely populated area, which often leads to civilians dying. And it's just has become a routine, which is appalling. Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, we see those examples there. We call upon Syria to respect sovereignty of states and basic norms of international law. We draw your attention to this act of aggression. We see the desire to expand the geography of armed escalation in the region. Now let's move to Ukraine. Kiev continues to commit terrorist attacks against Russian regions. From September 30th to October 7th, Banderites used tube artillery daily to shell Gorlovka in the DPR. They exclusively used NATO 155mm shells, cluster munitions, and UAVs. In total, there have been over 200 shots were fired and several dozen drones were launched. Regrettably, there are victims. 4 people died, including a teenager born in 2007. 45 people were injured, including 2 teenagers born in 2007 and a girl born 2015 correspondingly. An outrageous incident took place in the Nikitovsky district of Gorlovka. An UAV attacked a shuttle bus at a bus stop. 8 passengers suffered injuries of moderate severity. The Petrovsky district of Donetsk is also suffering from shelling. The enemy artillery is purposefully firing at it. On October 3rd, the AFU attempted to attack the Kursk NPP. They did it using aircraft-type UAVs. The attempt was thwarted by electronic warfare equipment. On October 4th, a car exploded in the city of Energodar. As the result, the head of the security pass group of the Zaporozhye NPP security department died. He was a former chairman of the Energodar City Council of Deputies, Andrei Korotky. According to investigators, an improvised explosive device was placed under the vehicle. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine released footage of the car bombing. It also published a derisive statement about a quote-unquote retaliation. In fact, it has taken responsibility for organizing and carrying out of this latest barbaric terrorist attack. What does the international community need more to understand who they are dealing with, who they have nurtured? Benderites do everything in their power to intimidate the population of the Belgorod region. They use artillery and UAVs to attack the local population. On September 30th and October 6th, we have reported strikes at the city of Shebekina. 3 people were injured. On October 2nd, the AFU used UAVs on the Tishanka settlement. A man and a woman were injured. On September 30th, in the settlement of Kropivne, a man died as a result of a Ukro-Nazi strike. 4 people were injured, including 2 girls, 14 and 3 years, respectively. On the same day, on the Belgorod-Volokonovka road, UAVs destroyed 2 trucks. 1 driver died, the second was injured. On October 2nd, an agricultural enterprise in the Yasny Zori settlement was shelled. 1 person was injured. One person was killed, 16 injured. On the 4th of October, the AFU's UAVs injured 8 people, 4 people in the Chermoshny settlement. On October 7th, UAVs injured drivers of agricultural machinery and a civilian car in the Novostroyevka-Piervaya settlement on Nikolsky Murom Road. On October 5th, Ukrainian UAVs tried to attack several civilian enterprises in the Voronezh region. 1 person was injured. Now let's talk about the atrocities of Ukrainian militants and foreign mercenaries in the Kursk region. Investigating authorities continue their work with a large body of data of multiple war crimes of AFU's militants and foreign mercenaries. We now have reports of a person who survived by a miracle. This person told us about how Benderites shut down a civilian car of a married couple who were trying to escape. The investigative committee initiated proceedings on the killing of 2 women and 1 man in the Sudzha district. The committee is also investigating Ukrainian nationalists from the 22nd and the 61st Separate Mechanized Brigades and the 80th Separate Air Assault Brigade. Those people are involved in a strike in an evacuation center in the Bolshoi-Soldatsky district. This attack destroyed destroyed residential buildings, cars, and social infrastructure facilities. The RIA Novosti news agency has learned that Russian servicemen have found footage of militants shooting civilians in a house in one of the region's villages on the video camera of one of the liquidated Ukro-Nazis. The camera was attached to a helmet. Close to the body of the criminal, they found an off-road vehicle, and inside this vehicle there were jewelry in a compartment glove. Maybe this discovery may somehow be linked to this killing. The captured terrorists tell us that the AFU in the Kursk region turned residential buildings and firing points. In accordance with the orders of the command, they had to kill the civilians on the spot and make it look like it was Russian forces who did it. Well, remember what they did in Bucha, and they were applauded by Western countries. And now Western journalists are asking our foreign minister at a press conference, why do you recall Bucha all the time? How can we forget about this? Bucha didn't emerge out of the blue. It looked exactly like the Nazis were behaving and acting during the Second World War. There were similar provocations who were made look like it was atrocities of Soviet soldiers. After Bucha, in the Kursk region, we have similar scenarios unfolding. Russia provided the OHCHR with the materials about these atrocities of Ukro-Nazis. We are expecting a substantive reaction from this structure and other relevant international agencies. Ukro-Nazis and foreign mercenaries are deliberately leading the hunt for civilians. They taken into, of course, they understand who they are aiming at, and they don't care if it's a child, if it's an elderly person, a woman. Those people are terrorists. These are people who deliberately kill civilians. The aforementioned crimes lie heavy on their conscience of the Kiev clique. That's their responsibility, and they will be punished for that. That's the responsibility of their Western sponsors. Russian law enforcement bodies will investigate each case. Everyone will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Russian courts, on the basis of the evidence of the investigative committee, continues to impose sentences to Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries for war crimes. On October the 1st, the Supreme Court of the DPR sentenced in absentia mercenaries from Finland and Israel to 14 and 10 years respectively, imprisonment for participation in hostilities on the side of Ukraine. On October 1st, the Supreme Court of the DPR sentenced Kudusov, Braiko, and Potapov of the AFU. They were found guilty of murder of 2 civilians in Mariupol in April 2022. Potapov and Braiko, 28 years imprisonment, Kudusov 29 years imprisonment. On the 2nd of October, the Committee of Russia sent a criminal case against the commander of the AFU, Kelim Bet. He was charged with organizing a terrorist act on the 9th of November 2023. Two MLRS strikes, HIMARS strikes, on the Skadovsky town. 10 people died, 11 injured, including officers of law enforcement bodies of Russia. They were investigating circumstances of the crimes of the Kiev regime. On October 7th, the Moscow City Court sentenced American mercenary Hubbard to 6 years and 10 months imprisonment for participating in battalions of territorial defense in Ukraine. Now let's move to NATO. On the 3rd of October, in Kiev, there was a ritual lightning visit, which drew attention. Newly appointed Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, visited. Straight away, he hastened to ensure Ukrainian protégés of their commitment, comprehensive support. He said that they have to fight till the last Ukrainian. He said Ukraine is now as close as ever to NATO. He played along in every way possible to the regime of Zelensky, and he also backed his statements up by saying that the right of Kiev to self-defense does not end on the border. Mark Rutte also said other different things and referred to the fact that the alliance does not have the right for Ukraine to strike at Russian inland regions, because this permission does not fall within the purview of separate countries of the NATO. Zelensky turned on broken record, begging to speed up the delivery of missile strike systems. He said that Kiev has urgent needs in the combat zone. He promised to promote his quote-unquote plan for victory. Remember, he had a plan for peace. Now it's called plan for victory. It's not a plan of victory. It's a plan to lose completely. We're expecting a Rammstein format meeting. The president of U.S. will be there, NATO countries. The U.S. president will show his best there, I'm sure. Remember the former Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. He drew attention to his statements. He was commenting to Financial Times on October 4th. It was published. He admitted that in exchange for NATO membership, Ukraine might give up some of its territories that it lost during the conflict. Now, I'm really curious. Is it only now that this thought came to the Westerners? It was them, not the representatives of the global majority, not representatives of some political circles. Those were Westerners, NATO members, who, since 2022, have been saying to Ukraine that they have to continue fighting and refuse any negotiations. And Stoltenberg, Borrell, White House, they were saying the same thing in Downing Street, in Berlin, and Paris, and other NATO capitals. They were saying the same thing. This conflict should be resolved in the combat zone, on the battlefield. The fate of Ukraine should be resolved there. That's their ideology we are talking about. Now, Stoltenberg has different statements. Stoltenberg cited Finland that, after the war with the USSR, ceded 10% of its territory, but returned in exchange at a safe border. But he forgot to remember that the Finland was fighting on the part of the Nazi Germany. Well, they rewrote the history of the Second World War, and now they're believing in some quasi or neo-history. We see an evident trend that Kiev cannot receive NATO membership soon. Boris Johnson said the same thing recently. Now it was picked up on by Jens Stoltenberg, and Washington, London, and Brussels are skeptical about the FU's potential, and they run different scenarios to avoid military and political collapse of the Zelensky regime that they contributed so much to. But the West forgets that one of the main reasons of the conflict was the West's obsessive desire to drag Ukraine into the alliance, to turn it into a springboard for confrontation with Russia. Well, there are massive violations of the rights of Russian and Russian-speaking populations, the cultivation of aggressive neo-Nazism and nationalism. We have to eradicate those root causes, otherwise we cannot resolve the crisis, and we've talked about it so much, so often. We have to reach sustainable and durable peace. It's not possible without securing its neutral and non-bloc status. We have to eradicate Nazism, chauvinism, the abolition of the law of all discriminatory legislation in Ukraine to achieve peace. Now, to rescue himself, Zelensky is ready for everything. On the mobilization in Ukraine, there's a heavy death toll in Ukraine. There's a two-way process of forced mobilization and desertion of Ukrainians. The Zelensky regime is coming up with new ways to replenish the reserves for further discarding of males of the working population. The deadline for attending the recruiting office military summons was reduced from 14 to 7 days, and to 10 days for other settlements. The Verkhovная Rada introduced a bill that requires conscripts under 17 to register for the military draft.
The document also includes the enrollment of women who have undergone basic military training. The pretext was the letters of American congressmen. They were not content because the Ukrainians younger than 25 years are not enlisted. It's just a perversion. It's not cynicism, it's a perversion. When a country is situated on another continent, it uses a state that has been coexisting in peace, interacting, cooperating with its neighbors, is used as an instrument for the implementation of their geopolitical manipulations, and it is done in a way that makes the citizens of that country think they should die because it's their historical mission, allegedly to protect the West from Russia. It's not just sick fantasies. It's not just some sick philosophy, it's a perversion. What does it testify about? That the fate of Ukrainian citizens is decided by non-Ukrainian politicians elected by Ukrainian citizens. Their fate is decided directly from overseas, where the American congressmen, having no idea about what the Ukrainian culture and history are, what the deep, true Ukrainian traditions are, they now call for using all the means to decrease the mobilization age in Ukraine to 25 years. It's just the American congressmen dreaming to destroy the Ukrainians as a nation, as an ethnic group, as a culture. They have not managed to do that with Russia, but they really wanted to cancel it. Now they are trying to cancel Ukraine up to the very end. Is any more proof needed? Who was the initiator of that? Who provided the whole link of chain of provocations, manipulations, in order to support that fire? That was Washington, London, and collective Brussels. No more proof is needed. They are not content with the cancellation of Ukraine as a whole now. They continue their fight against the Russian language. The practice of stifling of the rights of Russian speakers in Ukraine continues, especially those using the Russian language. The Verkhovna Rada has introduced a draft law to prohibit the use of the Russian language in extracurricular activities. I suppose that the next ban will be to think in Russian language, and the next draft law will be about a ban to think in general, think in any language. The Ombudsman for the Protection of the State Language, Crimean, presented an initiative to destroy any version of keyboards in Russian on every computer in Ukraine. But it is well paid in the West. The Kiev regime does anything to destroy the Russian language, which is a bone in the throat for the Kiev junta. But it has no result, despite anything. Yes, we fight the Banderites. Our servicemen in the front line fight. However, we see what is spoken on another side. It's also the Russian language. How do you think? Will all those laws be active when people in a critical moment of life and death for them will continue to think in Russian despite at that moment having an order to kill the Russians? What is the target of those laws? Their purpose is to develop conflict among people even more, as if in some distant future it's just some mine. And everything happens just vice versa. Even more Ukrainians prefer to speak in Russian because the Russian language cannot be destroyed. And maybe because of that, they begin to realize what has been done to them by those who have so cruelly deceived them in the West. These facts once again confirm the relevance of the task of the special military operation and the elimination of threats on the territory of Ukraine, and as the Russian leadership has said, they all will definitely be fulfilled. And more confirmations about the terrorist nature of the Kiev regime is the investigation by the authorities of Mali of terrorist organizations acting in the territory of the Sahara-Sahel region. Most terrorists were among the ranks of the so-called support group for Islam and Muslims. They attacked the settlement of Tinzhao-Ten on the border with Algeria, and the secretary of the intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Yusuf, and the ambassador of Ukraine in Senegal, they openly spoke about the support of jihadists. The ambassador of Ukraine in Dakar was summoned to the foreign ministry in Senegal, and it was conveyed to him. There was an investigation of those who participated in an attack against Mali servicemen and those who organized this terror attack. International legal organizations can also be involved in that, and those who interact with the jihadist movement in Sahara-Sahel region and finance the anti-government activities in the region. They aim to establish all the chain of contacts, terror organizations affiliated with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Once again, we draw attention to the duplicitous policy of the West, supporting in words joint efforts against terror threat in Africa, and actually they evade condemnation of the Kiev regime that are ready to cooperate with the radical groups in order to harm Russia. And we will continue to draw attention of the global community and the UN structures in order to prevent any harm made to stability and security in Africa. Now the scandal that has become global, international, those that honoring in the Canada Parliament of Yaroslav Hankar, there was a standing applause in the Canadian Parliament to him. Back in 2021, it was conveyed to local authorities that the victims of communism, there are 553 victims named on the monument. And actually that was the case. Are you surprised? You should not be surprised, because it was Canada that became home for tens of thousands of Nazis, actually collaborators from SS Galiciana division. And the journalists revealed that the memorial fund included the names of Hautman, Roman Shukevich, and Povelic, and a thorough check revealed that the victims noted on the memorial, more than a half, around 330, could be Nazis or Nazi collaborators. The officials confirmed that those people could be linked to organizations of Ukrainian Nazis, Baltic Nazi groups, Latvian SS groups that conducted mass executions that were documented. It's another manifestation of double standards and beastly hypocrisy of the official Ottawa. They are trying to solve the Nazi collaborators to whom they had provided asylum after the Second World War. sponsors of those hell monument that invokes many questions in the Canadian society are those who try to justify the atrocities of Hitlerites. Well, it's a good idea maybe to publish the list of all the sponsors for the global community to know who sponsors monuments erected to the Nazis. I think it could be organized. Now about the situation in Moldova, we continue to follow the developments in that country, who have turned an electoral campaign to elect the President of the Republic and the European referendum into an anti-Russian, anti-Moldovan farce. On the 7th of October, the Central Election Commission of Moldova declared that in Russia, instead of 5 election polls, only 2 will be open, and the 2 of them will be in Moscow. Each of them will have 5,000 bulletins printed for election polls in St. Petersburg, Surgut, and Yaroslavl. How do you think? They were destroyed. Yes, it's just so pretty democracy. According to Sandu, the number of the Moldovan diaspora in Russia, maybe Sandu does not know that, amounts to up to 500,000 people. 500,000. For 500,000, Sandu prepared 5,000 bulletins. These are the Moldovan citizens. They have the right to vote. Sandu used to support democracy, if I remember well, for the European values, whose basis are the European values, as the will of citizens. How many citizens, what is the percent of the citizens who have the right to bulletin from the total number? At previous elections, the Moldovan authorities have opened around 20 election polls. Now it is only 2 of them. It is a cut in more than 10 times. So it can be compared to a cut in the rights on the territory of Moldova itself. In Italy, there is a little bit more than 100,000 Moldovan citizens, and for them, let us think how many election polls. In Russia, it is 500,000 people and just 2 election polls. In Italy, maybe 1. No, it is not 1. It is 60 election polls and 236,000 bulletins provided for that. But it seems unlikely, because it's just 100,000 Moldovan citizens in Italy. Why are 236,000 bulletins needed? It's just fraud. That's what the Sandu regime does. At previous elections, it were the voters in Italy who provided for 26% of the vote. So it's just fraudulent technologies used by Chisinau regime, as advised by the West. They demonstrate panic fear of defeat and disrespect to any democratic procedure. And actually, it's disrespect towards the right and freedoms of their own citizens. Now the official Chisinau states without proof hybrid threats by Russia. What are the hybrid threats? That we tell the truth, that we quote numbers? By the way, let them just provide arguments against them. So they will say we have made a mistake, intentionally or not intentionally. But until the Moldovan authorities provide some arguments against our data, let them not speak about any hybrid threats. But maybe by hybrid threats they mean the truth, the real truth. And with that, it is them who do everything to conceal many facts of interference of the West in the electoral process. Like the US aid, UK aid, they are mentioned on the front page of the official site of the Central Election Commission of Moldova. The official site, just imagine that. Is it governed territory? Is it half colony? What is that? It's just some racism against a sovereign state. Usually sponsors are mentioned at some events or some invitations to some events. It's not surprising that the ambassadors of the US and France and Great Britain are welcome and regular guests in the Moldovan Central Election Commission. But rather, they are not guests, but masters. On the 4th of October in Chisinau, the Romanian Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu called on the Moldovan leadership to understand correctly that the future of Moldova is in the EU. But let him say openly, not in the EU, but in Romania. And Russia, according to him, would lead the country to isolation and poverty. But we now see how the European Union now flourishes. According to history, it was the Romanian occupation in 1918-1940 that brought poverty to Bessarabia and mass executions. And Moldova within the USSR, it was a period of flourishing of Moldova. It can be proved by facts and real data. The total cleansing is underway by the Moldovan authorities of the media. The licenses have been invoked of the Prime and Public TV, RuTube, Yandex Music, Kinopoisk Band, as well as MD24 internet portal. And it's even Russian cartoons that are banned. The Three Cats, Smeshariki, so it's a strike against Sandu, I think. The Moldovan authorities are so not confident in their positions that they see the threat in cartoons for children. The peculiarity of this election campaign was the politicization of the language issue. In 2020, Maia Sandu, it's a quote, promised to be president for all the citizens of the country, and actually on the 5th of October, the Moldovan Election Commission pointed out inadmissibility of the use of any languages, despite apart from the state language, by political parties in interaction with public authorities, end of quote. On the 7th of October, the national company Teleradio Moldova noted the possibility of the use of just 1 minute in local languages. It's just the links of one chain to discriminate the Russian-speaking residents of Moldova and to separate them. And the attacks against opposition politicians, their persecution is continued. According to Journal TV, 2 opponents of Sandu were denied in publication of the election videos because the legislation does not allow the arguments against opponents.
Nevertheless, the Maia Sandu regime is now powerless to correct its anti-ratings inside the country and beyond its borders. Over the last week, anti-government protests of the Moldovan diaspora were seen in Terney, Dublin, Dortmund, Dusseldorf. It's obvious that the tactics of whipping up of non-existing Russian threats, including unfounded accusations of our country, is not working. People see what has to be done. Sandu is canceling the Moldovan language, changing the mindset of the Moldovans and turning it into Romania. Everyone sees that, everyone understands that. Moldovan citizens understand all of this. They see the real reason of the policies of Maya Sandu. These policies are anti-popular, meaning that it's against the interests of the people. And it's a failure because people realized what's behind those slogans, memes, mottos, this European nature. In fact, they're being pushed into colonial dependence. They're being forced to refuse their own mindsets, culture. Moldovans see the failed anti-popular policy of this European course, and they make their conclusions. And Romania sent a notification that starting on October 14th, functions of consular services in the region will be transferred to the Romanian embassy in Moscow. This step is a consequence of the decision of the Russian side to terminate the bilateral intergovernmental agreement and the opening of the mentioned consular office, which was adopted in December 2023 as a response to the unfriendly actions of the Romanian authorities. Now, let's go to classics of liberalism. The British establishment raped the British justice. A British woman, Dawn Sturgis, died. It was 2018 in Amesbury. Sergei and Yulia Skripal, there was a hearing planned for October. Everyone who saw that statement were shocked. They laughed and then they were shocked. It was just laughing at legitimate justice. The chairman of the investigation, Cruz, decided to not for the Skripals not to participate, not remotely, not offline. Instead, protocols of communications of Skripals with British police will be used. You might say, well, maybe the questions was referred to the Skripals in 2024. No, the old protocols from 2018 will be used. They're written statements, answers to the questions as a part of the public investigation. The personal presence, the presence of this family in the courtroom or their remote presence will be a threat to their physical safety. Maybe there might be another attack like the one that was in Salisbury. It can be committed by people who have the same motives as people who attacked them in 2018. I want to ask the question, who are these people? 6 years have passed since 2018. Has the British justice identified those responsible? The investigative bodies in Britain, we can say that they will publish clown-like statements. It's a politicized statements, which are not transparent. They decided in advance what the outcome of the case will be. The justice cannot prevail. It's just a circus. We see the desire of London to not let the Skripals appear in public. There are absurd pretexts in this regard. we cannot receive information about our citizens. We'll continue to require from the British side comprehensive, unbiased results of the investigation, of this provocation back in 2018. We'll need consular access to these people because we have a Vienna Convention, even two of them, that allows for that. What is the logic here? I'm curious. The British justice or the British law enforcement bodies think the following way. If there has been some actions that threat some people, these people cannot appear in public any longer. Or maybe they say that they cannot ensure their safety. What kind of argument is that? I'm curious if there has been any similar actions in the past. One more important date this year, the 80th anniversary of liberation of Riga from the German fascist troops, 14th September to 22nd of October 1944. In the Great Patriotic War, Latvia was one of the first Soviet republics completely occupied by Hitlerites in July 1941. The German fleet could operate in the eastern part of the Baltic Sea and maintain contact with Scandinavia, who supplied the Third Reich with strategic materials. On 14th September 1944, the Riga offensive began with the support of artillery and aviation. The 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd Baltic fronts took part in this offensive, the Baltic Fleet as well. And the 130th Latvian Rifle Corps was part of the 2nd Baltic Front. In the early hours of 13th of October, the right bank part of Riga was liberated, and on October 15th, the whole city. The chief of political department of the 43rd Guards Latvian Rifle Division wrote that the population in Riga was very happy to see Soviet troops, welcomed them with red flags and flowers. The Soviet troops inflicted a strategic defeat to the Army Group North and advanced 150 kilometers and liberated the main part of Latvia. Decree number 194 of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief from October 13, 1944, troops that took part in this liberation were commended officially. And in Moscow there was a salute fired of 324 guns, 24 artillery salvos in total. People who distinguished themselves in combat formations and units were awarded the honorary name Rishskie, and 139 people were awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. The website of the Russian Historical Society published materials about the liberation of this occupied territory by fascists. Regrettably, we have to state that the current Latvian government would like to forget those people who liberated them from Nazism. The official Riga has deliberately focused its policy to falsify the history of the Second World War, to glorify Nazis' collaborators. Today, memorials to Soviet soldier liberators are being destroyed, and anything running with Russian culture is being cancelled. You cannot teach Russian any longer in this country. The same case was when the country was infected with Nazism. The attempts of the Latvian authorities to refuse everything that is connected to Russian, we will always remember and cherish the memory of the Soviet Union and contributed to the victory of the enemy. You should not segregate people to deny decorations, photos, and data of those people who were originally living in Latvia, Riga. No. Those people are heroes for our country. They were fighting shoulder to shoulder with our fathers and granddads. Now to the Collective Security Treaty Organization. The October 7th marked the 22nd anniversary of the signing of the CSTO Charter. The Russian Foreign Ministry website published a commentary to this topic. You may recall that the history of the CSTO dates back to the to the Treaty of Collective Security. It was signed in Tashkent on May 15, 1992. Now the organization includes Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. According to Article 3 of the Charter, the objectives of the CSTO are strengthening the peace, international and regional security and stability, independence, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of member states on the collective basis. The document defines the following principles that guide the organization in its activities. The priority is given to political means over the military ones, strict respect for independence, voluntary participation, equality of rights and responsibilities of member states, non-interference in matters falling under the national jurisdiction of member states. A vivid confirmation of the CSTO maturity and effectiveness were the concerted actions of the bloc countries to help the Republic of Kazakhstan in stabilizing internal political developments in January 2022. Then the member states subsequently adopted a number of important decisions to modernize the crisis response system. Well, the deepening of allied cooperation is the priority of foreign policy of Russian Federation, and peacekeeping component is the most important part of the evolution of the organization, of its further existence. We're now establishing we see new conditions being established to cooperate with the UN to bring peace. We have experienced expertise in Russia see this bloc as one of the platforms to create a new continent-wide security architecture, free from external dictates, which is designed to unite the efforts of leading regional states and associations. Now, for foreign ministry workers, it's a very important date, October 14th, the University of Foreign Relations. It's the 80th anniversary since the day of its foundation. Over the last 80 years, this university is the most important talent pool for the foreign ministry. They're backbone of our diplomatic service, holding positions in central office and in foreign institutions, and it's a versatile nature of the education that makes this special. Our graduates work fruitfully abroad in our country, in civil service, corporate sectors, science, journalism, and in other areas, in our country and abroad. For example, the graduates include the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, the President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. This university prepares foreign affairs specialists, and they are highly appreciated by President Putin. For achievements in scientific and teaching activities, President Putin signed a decree to award the MGIMO staff with the Order of Alexander Nevsky. 2024 is a special year for all the graduates. There are different thematic events, conferences, sports events. In different countries, there are alumni meetings. A documentary has been shot about the university, and it will premiere on Channel 1 in October. They've conducted interviews with famous graduates that share their impressions about their education, their alma mater. And there's an interview of a person who you all well know. Well, let's now spoiler it. At the end of September, there was an initiative of the President of Kazakhstan, and with the support of our country, to hold a conference, of a high-level conference, Sustainable Development and Security in the Eurasian Space. The central festive occasion of the upcoming anniversary is going to be the gala concert in the Grand Hall of the Moscow Conservatory. It's going to take place on October 14th, and it will be a remarkable event in our capital, both culturally and socially. Well, you do not celebrate people in advance usually, but we'll do everything in our power to make this, to help our university to celebrate this holiday as nicely as possible. Now, the Ministry of Health, an international event. Let's now turn to this topic. I want to turn to journalists who work internationally on from 10th to 12th of October. In Endocrinological Center, it's going to be a second international congress devoted to metabolism. On 10th of October, it's going to take place offline, and on 11th and on 12th of December, it's going to be remote. 1,500 doctors have already registered to take part in this event from Russia, other countries. Experts from the UAE, China, the Netherlands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. The main mission to create a platform to exchange expertise and to acquire knowledge on how to prevent certain diseases and treat them. I'm not going to spoiler everything that is going to happen at that conference, but we will give references to this website and accreditations. So we invite all those journalists to take part to talk about this event. Do we have International Life with us? Good afternoon, Ms. Zakharova. How can you comment on the progress of the investigation into the terrorist attacks on the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines? What consequences could the absence of its results have? We have regularly commented on this issue. As you know, you might recall that it's about terrorist attacks on September 26, 2022. Half a year after the statements of Joe Biden, Deputy State Secretary Victoria Nuland said that the project will be nullified, destroyed. Well, that's what happened. 2 years later, after the terrorist attack, the collective West does not stop trying to evade responsibility. They do everything in their power to prevent the international community from talking about that, but we will not allow them to do that. That's why this topic has been discussed, is being discussed, and will be discussed. We are highlighting this topic, constantly referring to it. We're asking questions and providing materials on this topic. This is a sabotage. It's a terrorist act concerning cross-border energy infrastructure, and it directly influences energy security. Those are global processes, lives of certain people and certain citizens. In February this year, Denmark and Sweden announced the end of their national investigations. And they do it, and I underscore it, despite the lack of results. They ended the investigation not because they have any results, because they are not just going to continue this work. The only result was that the pipelines had indeed been deliberately destroyed by explosives, but that it was not possible, I quote, to proceed with criminal proceedings. It's a unique situation. It's very characteristic of the countries of the collective West. The other day, I published a material on the investigation in Belgium. A couple of policemen, when a Slovak citizen was trying to legally cross the border, tied him, started to stifle him, used Nazi symbols. They raised their hands, you know what gesture that was, and they were just, playing. It was like a spectacle. They were trying to look like a Hitler, and the person died as the result. And they said that the person committed suicide in his cell. There were video cameras in the cell, but there was no footage of him killing himself. But there is a video that was published where they tortured him. The investigation lasted for 6 years. It's not a deduction method.
It's obvious facts confirming that. There is a video coverage that testifies of inadmissibility of the actions committed against that person, citizens of Slovakia. The investigation was for many years and it ended in nothing. No one is guilty, everyone is free, but the person is not alive who they were killing, seen by many people on the internet. And it's the method used by the Westerners when they need to conceal the truth. There is just no possibility to find something, some facts, some traces, to reach some conclusions in Copenhagen and Stockholm. All the time, they just repeatedly refused to cooperate with our country. They said there was no possibility to continue investigation. However, we were ready for such interaction. They did not address us, and they even ignored our requests. As they said, they needed to wait for, as they said, effective and transparent investigation of Germany, despite Berlin having failed to provide any information about its investigation to the UN, to the Security Council. And the approaches of Berlin became obvious after Scholz, the Chancellor, said that allegedly it was Russia who stopped the shipments of gas to Germany, and not Germany, who was not willing or not going or just not using Russian gas, just not opening the supply channel, having all the possibilities to reach an agreement with Moscow on that. Do you imagine? It was the Chancellor who openly lied to his citizens and to the global community that it was Russia who had stopped the supplies. And not because of the terror attack, the German side was not using the gas pipeline, although it was working and it could be renewed in several weeks. It's the same inconstructive policy of the Westerners. The refusal to support the draft at the Russian draft at the UN Security Council. I would remind you, this Russian draft included carrying out an independent international investigation under the auspices of the UN. It could be done in several ways, either Secretary General or some special ad hoc working group. Anything could be done, and Russia made such proposals, but it was blocked by the Westerners. It was blocked by Washington and its satellites, and our initiative did not have the necessary 9 votes supporting that. And Americans and their satellites torpedoed the Russian draft on this issue. Even the statement of the president was not allowed. What could be in this statement by the president of the Security Council? Just to conduct an investigation of those who had blown up that pipeline. And any attempts were blocked to provide some information about that investigation of International Terrorism Act having transnational nature. And it's obvious that if calls are made from the United States territory to destroy infrastructure, the infrastructure includes the territory of several states, and investors are companies in a number of countries as well. And also at the official level, it is not denied that information that Kyiv representatives could be behind that or affiliated persons. It just has obviously, this diversion, sabotage has obviously international nature. We have provided requests to Denmark, Sweden and Germany on international legal assistance, and it was ignored by them. And the final act was played by the Westerners just recently. As you remember, on the 4th of October, the thematic briefing convened by the Russian Federation, and another draft of the Security Council the statement was blocked. It was hard-headed and covered the line of the Westerners to block that document. And it was the word terrorism that they opposed in that most of all. Just imagine, when they had references to terror attack against Nord Stream 1 and 2, they immediately said that such word should not be used in the document. And it's very interesting because Scholz, the German Chancellor, in his speech on the 14th of September this year, he spoke directly about the terror nature of this act of sabotage. So the Western countries refuse to investigate. As they say, we have the transparent and professional investigation by Germany, and Germany says that it's obviously a terror attack, but does not share anything else. And the United States, being the satellites of Germany, Sweden, and Denmark, also within the framework of their bloc organizations, they just put obstacles to any mention of the terror nature of the events, and do not give a possibility to the Security Council to consider this issue. It creates challenges for the entire world. Lack of transparency by Germany led to many theories and versions, obvious conspiracy, and obvious fake news. And it's a desire of the real masterminds of this crime to hush up the situation, to lead the investigation on a wild goose chase, in order to ignore this issue as if it has never existed. Any attempts to lead the investigation on a wild goose chase are doomed. We guarantee that. It's just instigations, and those guilty in the terror attack were convinced they should be punished accordingly. And we intend to keep this issue in the focus of attention of the global community. One more question. Is there some reaction of human rights organizations to calls of the Russian side on Ukrainian obligations on free religion, freedom of religion? So actually there was a request to the UN Commissioner. He is a citizen of Austria, Volker Turk, on the freedom of religion. In our request, we mentioned the protection of the constitution order in relation to religious organizations, but actually that draft law that paved the way to the destruction of the freedom of religion and deprived many Ukrainian citizens to worship. And the High Commissioner allegedly keeps track of the situation with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and reflects the discriminatory nature of the measures taken by the Kiev regime, and envisages access to free court. It's just some hypocrisy multiplied by fear, and they must be afraid of the anger. Mr. Tok from Austria, he is afraid of the fury of Western masters. that his status of the UN High Commissioner gives him the right to impersonally and without any results to respond to the issue that is of concern to millions of people. The office of the UN High Commissioner has turned to such a pro-Western propaganda instrument that is working on political orders of the West and the Kiev regime. Thank you very much. I would like to say that what is the danger of such approach? The structure affiliated with the United Nations organization is ready to justify any crimes of the Kiev regime and to shift the responsibility to those who are not guilty. And Volker Turk speaks directly about the necessity to punish Russia. And as he says some proof in order to give it, to provide it to international organizations, and does not mention the crimes of the Kiev regime. We think it is manifestation of ignoring by the structure of the principles of objectivity in its work, and Volker Turk, as the head of this structure, acts not as the UN official, but as some coordinator appointed by the West, connected with financial ties to his sponsors. That is why, in general, we make serious conclusions from this situation in relation to the interaction with this structure. Thank you.